I can't in good faith and good conscience recommend Cali raised Moto at this point, based off of some things that was shared publicly. What's up, guys? So, as you just saw, here we are 8 hours later, showing you exactly how we went from the old Daymaker Harley Davidson headlight to the Baja Designs LP6s. Now, with that said, I'm gonna take you through a process that I have yet to see any other creator do, because when you get this kit, it can be kind of confusing at first because you're getting certain components that you don't necessarily need for this install, such as this J, I believe it's called a J connector, this 4-pin connector. You don't need that. You can set this aside, keep it aside, whatever. You're not gonna need that. Each headlight comes with the hardware that it needs to mount to these back brackets that mount to the main bracket. So both headlights are gonna mount to that. There is a left and a right, as if you're staring at the bike straight on. The right is obviously the right, left is the left. So keep that in mind if you're wanting to designate, if you did the amber and clear like I did. I want this on my clutch side, so on the right side, I want the amber closest to oncoming traffic. Now, that's gonna help hopefully with higher visibility, with people being able to see me a lot faster, a lot easier. So that's the plan. Let me, I've already got these 90% of the way mounted to the brackets, but I'll show you what you need to do to mount them to the individual brackets, and then we will go out to the bike and get them mounted to the bike. Also, another piece of helpful information, the wiring harness. You are going to have to do some splicing of the ends. This positive side's already been cut, I already cut it. And then that is going to crimp with our 30 amp fuse section. But you don't want to do this until you've already ran your wiring under the tank. So this is going to go on. You're going to, obviously it connects to your battery, but this part here on this end, your little collar here, or your crimper, you're going to slide that in with the main wiring harness, and then you're going to crimp it. And then if you have a heat gun, you can heat shrink the ends to make them more tight fit. All right, so as you can see with the finished one, it's got the 2 1/4-inch bolts on each side. We're gonna take our 1/4-inch, and I believe these are 20 thread, and you're gonna throw a washer on there like we have here, and they've already put some Loctite on there for you. And then that just goes 2 on each side. Just leave yourself enough wiggle room to make any final adjustments when you're testing the height of your beam. There we go. That way you can adjust them once they're on the bike. Ready to do the install on the LP6s, but first we just need to get our headlight out of here. If you know how to take your headlight out, you can just skip ahead to the next section where we do the bracket install. All right, so we got to get these covers, these vent covers off. and it's just going to be a Torx 25 to get those off. They're just on there pretty loose. And we'll do the right side, same way. All right, so the right side is off. Next up, these little Christmas tree clamps or pins or whatever the hell you want to call them, holding in those relays. Just gonna pop those through. Boom. All right, got those out of the way. With the Baja design LP6 bracket, we're gonna be reusing these 4 bolts that hold our headlight assembly in. So I just use a 3/16 Allen head socket. And this will drop out just like that. And then we just simply unplug it. All right, guys, so this next part, there's 2 ways you can do this to feed your wiring harness from the Cali raised Moto harness from the front of the bike. You can either feed it by buying a 48-inch zip tie, which is what we did, but I decided against it. I'm gonna take a few extra steps and make sure it's getting fed the right way and not getting caught up on anything. And the way we need to do that is by just removing our tank. You don't have to unhook everything, just unhook your pump plug, which is the gray one, and then remove your 4 bolts for your tank. You can pick it up, slowly turn it, and just set it on something soft on your rear fender. And then that way we can pop a top cover that hides all of our wiring that goes up the neck of the bike. And then we can just run our harness that way. So let's go ahead and do that. I already went ahead and removed our 4 bolts for the tank. You got 2 here, and then 1 on each side up in the front. And so just remove those 4 bolts. And we're, like I said, we're just gonna pick it up, turn it, set it on the rear fender. We can pop the zip ties. I've already exposed this area, so I've already done this, but you're gonna have a zip tie here and then a zip tie further up, and then you have this tape. You just cut that. Always remember, guys, too, before you're doing anything electrical, remove your 50 amp fuse. All right, cover's off. All right, so let me show you how we're gonna do this. Don't worry about this stuff right now. This is all gonna get tucked away. This is just our radio stuff for our head unit. But we're gonna take our wiring harness and we're going to feed it through the right side of the neck. We're just gonna take this, run it up through the side of this housing, down with the rest of our wires, and it's just gonna come out here. So we need to attach our red positive wire to the red coming out right here. And they provide you with the junction to do that, and it's a solder point junction. So you will need a source of heat to melt that junction together. So we'll strip the ends a little bit, just the casing off. Another thing you want to double check, make sure you have your 30 amp fuse in there, which we do. Just make sure that's nice and secure. Make sure that's closed all the way. And then we're gonna trim a little bit off each side to make our connection with this guy here. So this little junction, you can see the silver in there. That's solder, and that's gonna melt to fuse those together, fuse those two ends together. So here's how your two ends of that should look. Next up, take a little bit off of the main wiring harness. And we're going to put one side in there like that. And just make sure both are lined up in the middle. And then make sure your wiring is just nice and tight. All right, so as you can see, our solder point melted together like it's designed to do, fusing those two ends. This is nice and tight. You want to wait for this to cool off before you try to move it around too much. Just give it a couple minutes to cool off. Here's how it should look once it's done. You should have these ends nice and tight, heat sealed on there, crimped down so there's a good connection. Show you this real quick before I put this cover back on to hold it in place. So as you can see, we just ran it right along the neck, or along the side of the rat's nest, and then it's gonna pop out down here. So when we have the cover on, you'll just see it from about here on. So let's put the cover on, get everything tidied up. We'll get it hooked up to the battery, and then I'll meet you back at the front of the bike. So that's how it should look coming out. You're putting this top cover back on. Make sure there's no single loose wires hanging out, that you're not crimping down and breaking when you're putting this top cover back on. Our head unit wiring. Just kind of get this up and out of the way as well, so we can at least get this first bolt started. I'm gonna start on the bottom. Now you're not gonna wanna tighten these bottom ones in all the way, because they're gonna have to come back out to put the outside finishing bracket on. All right, so the hardware we're going to be using is labeled Harley Baja Designs Light Hardware. Each bolt gets a washer and then a dab of blue Loctite. So yeah, make sure you're doing a crush washer for each bolt and then a dab of blue Loctite. One thing to note, you don't need to crank the hell out of these. Just make sure they're nice and snug. The last thing you want is to be pulling the threading out of that mounting bracket. You don't need to torque these down, just make sure they're snug. All right, so we got the right side on. Going to the left side. We left these front bolts on each side. We left those loose. That way we could adjust our lighting up and down before we finalize it and tighten everything down, just to make sure our beam isn't going to be blinding other drivers. All right, guys, we are almost finished. So all we got left to do is do our adjustments on our headlights before we put the filler bracket in. So we're going to want to make sure our beams are where they're supposed to be. What I'm going to do is back the bike about 15 feet and then make sure they're just kind of level, and then maybe just slightly down, just a little bit off a level. So this was the exact spot we were finishing at when this happened. Cali raised Moto's wiring harness to the lights from the bike, grounded out inside of the harness somewhere, and burned up. Almost caught my entire bike on fire, as you saw in that clip. It was smoking everywhere. Had to pull everything off, 4 hours of work, getting everything set up, taken out, everything put back in, brackets on, all that, down the toilet to see exactly what burned up. What's weird is the fuse was out, so I'm not exactly sure how that even happens. Jake from Cali Rays did overnight new lights because the lights torched with the harness. He did send another harness, obviously, because the old one looked like this. Now, with that said, I can't in good faith, not just because of what happened to my bike, that is lastly of my reasoning here. I can't in good faith and good conscience recommend Cali Rays Moto at this point, based off of some things that was shared publicly about the owner and some illegal activities, including little people. I don't know when these events happened. I don't like bringing up dirt on people, especially when we're trying to just do fun shit like this, right? But in good faith, I cannot promote or tell you guys that Cali Raised Moto is a solid company, because it's owned by a creep, and I can't get behind that. So this installation is for this video only. Once it's done, these are coming out and going back, or I'll keep the lights and just use a different bracket from a different company with a different harness from a different company. Hopefully it doesn't burn up for a second time. I'm gonna hook it up to the battery. We'll put our fuse, our 50 amp bike fuse back in, turn it on, and pray for success. Here we go. And as you can see, another thing, this Cali Rays Moto bracket, see that bolt that just flew out that goes right there? See if I can zoom in on that. Right there. Those threads were stripped out on the mounting bracket. So I can't say the quality is there, especially for the price on this setup. There's plenty of other companies that make brackets for the Road Glide, for the Baja lights, as well as the harness you need. Again, I can't recommend Cali Race Moto, given the first harness about burned up my bike, and now this with the stripped out threading, and then of course the ultimate kick in the face. The dude is a registered offender. So those 3 reasons, can't recommend it. But the lights are good to go. Baja Designs, no problems with them. It's just this third party that makes the bracket and the harness that is trash. So do yourselves a favor, get something else from a different company. So you remember the 2 screws down there in the bottom? The original mounting screws for our OEM light. Those need to come out again. Remember, you didn't want to tighten them down all the way when we first started. And that's because this mounting bracket goes right here. And we'll put those bottom screws in. You want to put a dab of blue Loctite on there to hold those in securely. Just get those nice and snug. From here to the bottom. Get those nice and tight. All right, there you go. There's the finishing bracket, and then we'll get the fairing put back on and get all of our custom dynamics lighting, our trim lighting and everything put on. And that'll wrap it up, guys.